Forget everything you know about heroic hunts of ancient times. There are no great victories here, no triumphant shouts, and no epic feats. Here, there is only biting cold, endless exhaustion, grumbling elders, and mammoths that die not in battle, but out of sheer boredom. You stand on the edge of the eternal permafrost, among people who have long grown tired of their own fate. Welcome to the harsh reality of ancient Eurasia, where dreams of glory disappear faster than the warmth from a night fire, and mammoth hunting turns into a bleak farce full of irony, blunders, and endless arguments. But before we begin, leave a like under this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I am really curious to see who has joined us. Now, make yourself comfortable. Let us begin. You awaken before the sun dares to climb above the horizon, and immediately you regret your existence. The cold is not merely cold, but a deep and ancient thing, seeping through every layer of hide and fur you possess. The smoke from last night's fire has long since dissipated, leaving only the stale aroma of half-burnt bones and your own persistent cough. You draw your knees to your chest, but even that fails to protect you from the drafts that creep into every corner of the dwelling. It is, by all measures, a perfectly ordinary morning for someone doomed to be a hunter in the great and dismal tundra of ancient Eurasia. It is said that today is an important day, although every day has the same taste of tedium and hunger. The elders, whose faces are as wrinkled as the birch bark they sometimes chew, insist that this is the day of the great hunt. They have repeated this statement every morning for as long as you can remember, which, admittedly, is not very long. But today, perhaps, their words carry a slightly heavier air, as if the spirits themselves have grown tired of the delay. You rise slowly, stretching stiff muscles and considering the possibility of simply crawling back into the shallow depression in the earth you call your bed. It would be a comfortable, if cowardly, decision. However, the memory of yesterday's thin, dried meat for dinner drives you forward. Hunger is the true chieftain here. As you step outside, the wind greets you with a slap, sharp and mocking. The landscape stretches before you, endless white, broken only by the silhouettes of ancient trees, their branches burdened with frost. The others are already gathering, a motley assembly of misery and hope, shuffling toward the central fire with the determined resignation of men and women who know the world will not be any kinder tomorrow. The morning ritual unfolds with painful slowness. The elders insist upon a meeting, the kind that involves much pointing at the horizon and repeating the word mammoth, as if it alone could conjure one from the mist. They discuss tracks seen 3 days ago, droppings found 2 days ago, and mysterious flattened grass, which might have been the work of a passing herd, or perhaps only of wishful thinking. Everyone has an opinion, and all are equally unhelpful. You find yourself fixated on the ancient club that lies at your feet. It has been passed down from hand to hand, each user adding a new dent or crack. You suspect it will outlive you, as most things seem destined to do. Beside you, your cousin sharpens a stone blade with the enthusiasm of a man who has long ago lost faith in the edge of things. Every scrape echoes the futility of the day ahead. Breakfast is a communal affair, which is to say that everyone is equally disappointed. The cook distributes thin slivers of smoked meat, the kind that tastes only vaguely of animal and more distinctly of ash and regret. No one speaks of the last hunt because that would mean acknowledging its failure. Instead, they mutter about the cold, about the gods, about how the snow has drifted deeper this year, as if the weather itself conspired against them. The children, wild haired and sullen, are conscripted into silence by a glance from the chief elder. It is a heavy silence, broken only by the crackling of fire and the occasional complaint from the old woman whose joints predict the weather with terrifying accuracy. She assures everyone that today is indeed the worst day for hunting, which means inevitably that it must be done today. As preparations drag on, you notice the subtle tensions rising. The younger hunters eye the elders with impatience, certain that they could do better if only given the chance. The elders, for their part, seem to take pleasure in recounting every failed hunt in excruciating detail, as if these stories might serve as some kind of invisible shield. You try to disappear into the crowd, hoping that today you might avoid the role of bait, but such hopes are as thin as the broth simmering over the fire. It takes a very long time to gather the necessary tools. Spears, many of which are more symbolic than practical, are checked and rechecked. A net, woven from fibers gathered last spring, is examined for holes. There are many, and each becomes the subject of an impromptu council. By the time the sun finally rises, a pale and unimpressed disk, you have counted at least 37 arguments about the proper way to approach a mammoth, each more tedious than the last. The gods, you decide, must be laughing, or perhaps, like everyone else, they are merely bored. Finally, the old chief stands and signals the time to depart. There is a moment of shuffling, as if everyone is hoping someone else will volunteer to lead. In the end, it is decided by the ancient method. Whoever steps forward first becomes responsible for everything that goes wrong. You set out, your breath forming ghosts in the frigid air. Behind you, the fire sputters, casting long shadows on faces already marked by defeat. There is no cheering, no bold songs, only the endless crunch of snow beneath your feet and the knowledge that, with luck, today you might return with more than just another story of disappointment. And if not, well, there is always tomorrow. There is always another mammoth, somewhere beyond the mist, and always another morning, just as cold, just as long, just as endlessly the same. You embark on the journey across the tundra, propelled by equal parts necessity and resignation. The sun, if one can call that pallid disk the sun, has risen only slightly higher, illuminating the world not with warmth, but with the kind of indifferent clarity that makes every hardship more visible. The snow is neither soft nor fresh, but instead a crust of old, wind-blown misery, brittle enough to slice your ankles through the thickest furs. With every step, you are reminded of the many virtues of huddling by the fire, but these are virtues only for those who have the luxury of an empty belly. The party moves slowly, as if collectively hoping that a mammoth might stumble upon you rather than the other way around. The elders lead from somewhere in the middle, which is naturally the safest place to be. The strongest hunters trudge at the front, faces set in grim determination. The rest are scattered behind, some carrying the net, others the precious few spears, many simply carrying the burden of dread. There is little to say, and even less worth saying. Conversation, when it occurs, consists mainly of complaints about the wind, the snow, the cold, the lack of visible tracks, and the inevitable conclusion that all this has been done before, with very little to show for it. No one dares to mention the possibility of failure, but the silence is so heavy it might as well be shouted. You find yourself staring at the horizon, hoping for a miracle, or at least for a sign, a cluster of broken twigs, an impression in the snow, something to break the monotony. But the tundra is as generous with its secrets as it is with its warmth. A single bird cries overhead, perhaps mocking you, perhaps lamenting your fate. The elders pause frequently to confer. Each conference is a master class in indecision. They debate the meaning of every shadow, every bent blade of grass, every faint line in the ice. Was it made by a mammoth? Was it just a trick of the wind? Was it the footprint of a rival band? The questions multiply endlessly, while the answers remain as thin as the gruel you choked down at breakfast. At one particularly lengthy stop, you are forced to listen as the oldest elder, his hair whiter than the snow, recounts the legendary hunt of his youth. In that tale, mammoths were so plentiful you could not walk a single pace without tripping over one. Spears flew like rain, nets were always unbroken, and no one ever returned home hungry. You suspect, with the bitterness born of lived experience, that none of it ever happened. Still, you nod respectfully, as do the others, because questioning the past is more dangerous than questioning the weather. Eventually, a shout comes from the front. A track has been found, or so it is claimed. The entire party converges upon it, forming a huddle of anxious excitement. There, in the crusted snow, is an indentation. It could be the footprint of a mammoth, or it could be the result of a particularly heavy hunter slipping on the ice. After a lengthy and circular debate, it is decided that it is indeed a track, and spirits rise, if only marginally. This meager evidence sparks a flurry of activity. The hunters begin gathering stones, some for weapons, some for comfort, and some merely because picking up stones is something to do. Spears are sharpened anew, nets checked and rechecked for holes. The elders, emboldened by the prospect of actual progress, begin arguing over who will be the first to throw a spear should a mammoth actually appear. The children, who have trailed behind with the women, are summoned forward. They are put to work gathering sticks for the trap, their protests ignored. It is a long, slow process, punctuated by occasional slips and falls, laughter quickly stifled by the glares of the elders. You join in because there is nothing else to do. Your hands grow numb, your feet colder still, but you persevere because perseverance is the only virtue left to those who have long since lost faith in fortune. You listen to the wind, which never stops, and to the endless complaints of your companions, which somehow manage to be even more persistent than the wind. The further you go, the more the landscape blurs into sameness. There are no landmarks, only variations on the theme of white and gray. Even the trees, which once stood as sentinels against the cold, now appear exhausted, bent, and broken by the relentless weather. You wonder if, in some distant future, someone will look at their fossilized remains and wonder what kind of fools wandered these lands. Occasionally, the elders stop to discuss the possibility of predators. Wolves, perhaps, or cave lions, or the ever present specter of rival hunters. They whisper about old feuds and old wounds, the kinds that never really heal, only scab over for a season. The younger hunters boast of their readiness to face any danger, but their bravado rings hollow in the empty air. As the day wears on, hunger gnaws at your insides. The thin meat from breakfast has long since vanished, replaced by a gnawing ache that is at once physical and spiritual. Someone suggests that, should the hunt fail, it may be time to move the camp again. This idea is quickly quashed by the elders, who prefer to blame the gods, the weather, or the younger generation for all misfortune. The search for signs of mammoth continues with the same lack of urgency that characterizes all great undertakings in your world. Every new discovery, a broken branch, a patch of disturbed snow, is met with hope, followed swiftly by disappointment. The elders insist on examining each one in detail, as if by sheer force of scrutiny they might change reality. Each inspection is followed by a council, each council by more debate, until at last someone, usually the chief, declares that progress is being made. The day passes like this, in a haze of effort and futility. The wind grows stronger, the cold more insistent. The sun, which never really committed to rising, begins its slow descent. Shadows lengthen, and with them the sense of foreboding. You realize that you have walked for hours, perhaps even for most of the day, with little to show for it but blisters and the growing certainty that you will never see a living mammoth again. Yet still, you march on. To stop would be to admit defeat, and defeat is a luxury no one can afford. So you keep your eyes fixed on the next patch of snow, the next possible track, the next hope that today will be different. And in the end, when the sky darkens and the elders call for a halt, you sit by a hastily constructed fire, listening to the same old stories, the same old complaints, the same old empty promises. The only thing that changes is the depth of your exhaustion and the realization that, in all likelihood, tomorrow will be exactly the same. Sleep comes slowly, if at all, as the wind howls and the cold seeps into your bones. You dream not of mammoths, but of warmth, of food, of a life that does not involve endless marching across a landscape that cares nothing for your struggles. But when dawn comes, you will rise, as you always do, and begin again, because that is what hunters do when there is nothing else left to do. You are awakened by the familiar chill that always creeps in before dawn, that small, persistent reminder that every new day is merely the continuation of a previous discomfort. Your dreams, such as they were, dissolve into the frozen air, replaced by a dull ache in every muscle and a mood as gray as the endless plain. There is no time for lingering by the dwindling fire. The elders, alert to the fact that the world has failed once again to end in the night, urge everyone to rise and begin the day's tedious work. You join the rest of the hunting party in a shuffle of furs, feet, and silent resignation, every step a silent negotiation with your joints. It is not long before the complaints begin to bubble up again, quiet and bitter, floating like steam above the weary heads of your companions. The first few hours are spent retracing the previous day's tracks, because even in the relentless pursuit of a mammoth, repetition is inescapable. The elders insist on stopping every few paces to inspect the ground, debating the origins of each mark, as if this time their endless analysis might yield a new result. You try to stifle a yawn, but it escapes, visible in the frigid air, to join the clouds of other unspoken miseries. Then at last, a change, a set of fresh tracks, so unambiguously large that even the most skeptical elder cannot dismiss them as mere wishful thinking or the result of over-eager hunters. There is a moment, brief and almost exhilarating, when the possibility of success seems real. Someone whispers the word mammoth, as though the animal might materialize from the fog if its name is repeated enough. This is, of course, the moment when nothing happens. The tracks lead on deep and wide, but the animal itself remains elusive, lost somewhere in the white silence ahead. The party moves forward, hearts beating just a little faster, as if the mammoth's invisible presence lends a temporary sense of purpose to the expedition. It is then that the elders call for a halt. They have decided, after some theatrical deliberation, that it is time to construct a trap. The logic, never very convincing to begin with, is explained once more. If you build the right kind of snare, and if the gods are feeling generous, and if the wind does not change, and if the mammoth is as foolish as you hope it is, perhaps the animal will blunder into your carefully set ambush. Thus begins the real work, which is neither glorious nor swift. The hunters spread out to gather materials, branches, stones, lengths of twisted sinew, anything that might help form a barrier, a tripwire, or a makeshift pit. The younger members of the tribe are conscripted to fetch and carry. their grumbling ignored by those who have learned that silent suffering is the only true form of communication. The assembly of the trap is an ordeal in itself. The net, last used during an unsuccessful attempt to catch a reindeer, is unraveled and inspected. Every hole is a subject of debate. Should it be patched with strips of hide or ignored in the hopes that mammoth intelligence is vastly overrated? The consensus, as usual, is never reached, so the net remains mostly as it was, full of holes and ambition. Meanwhile, the elders position themselves as overseers, their advice alternating between pedantic and contradictory. One insists the pit should be deeper, another warns that too deep a pit will alert the animal. One advocates for more branches to be piled at the entrance, another demands fewer to avoid suspicion. The only constant is the slow passage of time and the growing sense that none of this will matter. You are assigned the task of digging. The ground, stubborn as always, yields only after repeated attacks with sharpened bones. Every shovelful of frozen dirt is a minor victory, celebrated internally, as outward displays of enthusiasm are frowned upon. The work is exhausting, and your back soon aches in a way that feels both ancient and inevitable. Occasionally, you look up and catch the eye of another digger. There is a silent agreement between you. This is as good as it will ever get. Eventually, after many hours and many arguments, the trap is considered finished. It is not a masterpiece of engineering, nor even of enthusiasm, but it is, at least, something to show for your labor. The net is stretched awkwardly across the pit, weighted with stones at the edges. Branches are stacked to create a false sense of security, and a narrow passage is left clear, as if to invite the mammoth in with the promise of easy passage. The sun has begun its descent by the time preparations are complete. The elders call for a final conference, and the hunters gather in a semicircle, each one pretending to listen while quietly calculating the chances of disaster. The chief elder speaks at length about strategy, emphasizing the need for silence, patience, and courage. You recognize these words as the same ones delivered before every hunt, regardless of the target or the outcome. With the trap set, everyone takes their assigned position. You find yourself crouched behind a low ridge, clutching your spear with hands that are too numb to grip it properly. Your job, you are told, is to wait for the signal, then rush forward, shouting and waving, in the hope of driving the mammoth toward the pit. It is a task that sounds simple until one remembers the size and temperament of the animal in question. The waiting begins. Minutes stretch into hours. The cold seeps back in, more insistent now, pressing against your skin and settling in your bones. You shift your weight from foot to foot, trying to stay alert. Around you, the others are equally restless, eyes darting to the horizon, breaths forming tiny clouds of impatience. The elders, unable to remain silent, pass the time with quiet bickering. They exchange stories of previous hunts, each more disastrous than the last, offering grim predictions in the guise of wisdom. One recalls the year when a trap failed so completely that the mammoth simply walked away, pausing only to trample two spears and the chief's dignity. The memory draws a few tired chuckles, but mostly it deepens the prevailing sense of doom. Night edges closer, painting the landscape in deeper shades of gray. The wind picks up, rattling the branches of your makeshift trap and setting the net to trembling. Every sound is amplified, every shadow elongated, until it seems impossible that anything so massive as a mammoth could move unseen. Yet there is no sign, no snort, no heavy footfall, only the relentless quiet, broken now and then by the distant cry of a bird that has better sense than to remain in this place. The chief elder attempts to rally spirits with a tale of a hunt that ended in triumph, but even he cannot disguise his doubts. The story peters out, unfinished, and silence returns. You huddle lower, pulling your furs tighter, counting your own breaths, and trying not to imagine all the ways the plan could fail. Time passes. The cold deepens. Your patience, already thin, frays further. At some point, someone tries to lighten the mood with a joke about the last time a mammoth wandered this close. No one laughs, but the effort is appreciated. After all, humor is the only weapon left when hope has gone missing. The sky grows darker, and the chances of success shrink with the light. The elders confer one last time, their faces lit by the last orange streaks of the sun. You know what comes next? A brief, awkward prayer to the spirits, a series of reminders about bravery and perseverance, and a promise, never kept, that things will be different after this hunt. You close your eyes, gripping your spear and waiting for the signal, knowing that, no matter what happens, tomorrow will bring another day of the same old hopes, the same old fears, and, if you are unlucky, the same old elders arguing over footprints in the snow. The darkness comes with a speed and intensity that always feels personal, as if the universe has decided that you, specifically, require an additional dose of misery this evening. With the sun entirely gone, your only illumination comes from the wan, uncertain flicker of torches set around the perimeter of your haphazard ambush. The fire casts elongated shadows that dance and tremble, giving the false impression that the night is alive with movement. You crouch lower, clutching your spear, and try to convince yourself that tonight will be different, though you have no evidence for such optimism. The cold settles into your bones in a way that is almost affectionate. It wraps around your fingers and toes, seeps into your joints, and makes every breath a reminder of how fragile you are. Each minute stretches into an hour, and each hour seems to pass only because the night has grown bored with your suffering. Then, without warning, a low rumble breaks the silence. The sound vibrates through the ground and up your legs, a deep and ancient music that you know instinctively could only belong to a creature as massive and indifferent as a mammoth. The entire hunting party stiffens. The elders exchange nervous glances, while the younger hunters grip their spears so tightly that their knuckles pale even in the darkness. There is a flurry of whispered orders, most of which contradict one another. Some urge caution, others insist on immediate action. The chief elder raises his hand for silence, but the gesture is lost in the confusion. Everyone is suddenly reminded of their roles, which seem somehow both vitally important and impossibly vague. You hear the mammoth before you see it, heavy footsteps pressing divots into the frozen ground, the scrape of fur against a low branch, the faint woof of breath in the icy air. Then it emerges from the gloom, an enormous shadow with eyes that glint like dull amber. The animal moves with a deliberate slowness that can only be called regal, utterly uninterested in the hopes and fears of the shivering bipeds clustered nearby. The plan, such as it was, is meant to be simple: drive the mammoth toward the pit and net by making as much noise as possible at the right moment. This is immediately complicated by the fact that no one can seem to agree on what the right moment actually is. The elders hiss instructions, the hunters mutter curses, and someone drops a stone with a clatter that echoes far too loudly in the silent night. The mammoth pauses, head swinging side to side as it listens. The entire party freezes, collectively holding its breath, as though silence might somehow make the great beast forget that it is surrounded by predators armed with little more than good intentions and sharp sticks. Suddenly, someone, perhaps the youngest hunter, perhaps the oldest, decides that waiting any longer is intolerable. With a yell that is equal parts bravery and desperation, he lunges forward, waving his spear and shouting at the top of his lungs. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. The rest of the hunters, caught between terror and the need to appear courageous, leap into action, rushing toward the mammoth with an enthusiasm that is not matched by coordination. Chaos ensues. The mammoth, startled but not impressed, trumpets its annoyance and begins to move, not toward the carefully constructed pit, but at an angle that takes it perilously close to the edge of the hunting party. The hunters, seeing their quarry escaping, redouble their efforts, each attempting to outdo the others in volume and ferocity. In the confusion, someone stumbles into the net, collapsing it in a tangled heap. Another slips on the icy ground and slides feet first into the half-dug pit, vanishing with a muffled cry and a chorus of curses from above. Spears are thrown, most of them missing by a margin so generous that the mammoth has no reason to feel threatened. One unlucky throw bounces harmlessly off the beast's shaggy flank, eliciting a snort of contempt. The elders, who had positioned themselves safely away from the action, now find themselves unexpectedly in the mammoth's path. They attempt to direct the chaos from behind a fallen log, but their instructions are lost in the general din. The chief elder, in a rare burst of decisiveness, attempts to rally the hunters by banging two stones together, which achieves nothing except drawing the attention of a nearby wolf who seems momentarily interested in whether the humans are edible. The mammoth, finally fed up with the noise and confusion, charges through the nearest opening. now conveniently clear thanks to the collapsed net and toppled hunters. It moves with the kind of ponderous grace that makes you wonder if perhaps it is mocking you. The animal vanishes into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of trampled snow, bruised egos, and a broken spear or two. For a moment, silence returns. Then slowly, complaints begin to fill the void. The elders blame the younger hunters for acting too soon. The younger hunters blame the elders for indecision. Everyone blames the one who fell in the pit, who was eventually hauled out, battered but unbroken, and immediately begins offering advice about what should have been done differently. The party regroups around the main fire, where the mood is somewhere between dejection and exhaustion. The cook, who had optimistically started a pot of broth in anticipation of victory, now doles out thin soup with all the ceremony of a funeral. No one meets anyone else's eyes. The only conversation is a litany of would haves, could haves, and should haves, all spoken in tones of resignation. The night drags on. The fire burns low, casting long shadows on faces that have grown even more tired than before. The chief elder, sensing the need for closure, gives a speech about perseverance and learning from failure. No one listens. Instead, you focus on your hands, which are scraped raw from clutching your spear, and on your feet, which have long since gone numb. As the hours pass, the cold grows sharper, settling over the camp like a blanket made of stone. Some of the hunters fall asleep where they sit. Others simply stare into the embers, searching for meaning in patterns of ash. The elders mutter quietly among themselves, already revising the history of the night so that blame will be more evenly distributed when the story is told tomorrow. Eventually, you lie down beside the remains of the fire, drawing your furs around you and trying not to think about what tomorrow will bring. Your dreams are filled with images of mammoths, always just out of reach, always walking away. You awaken several times, shivering, to the sound of wind howling over the plain and the soft complaints of your companions. When dawn finally comes, you are not sure whether you have slept at all. The fire is little more than a pile of glowing coals, and your body feels older than the bones scattered along the hunting trail. You rise slowly, unwilling but unable to do otherwise, and look around at the faces of your tribe. They are all marked by the same exhaustion, the same bitter recognition that the world remains unchanged, that the hunt has ended in failure, and that, as always, you will have to try again. The only certainty is that the mammoth, wherever it is, has survived another day. You cannot help but feel a grudging respect for the animal and an even deeper sympathy for yourself. Dawn creeps in slowly, as if even the sun is reluctant to witness the aftermath of your tribe's latest attempt at greatness. The fire has surrendered to ash, and the camp is scattered with the detritus of a night spent failing at heroism. You stand, feeling every ache and bruise, your body weighed down by cold and by the heaviness of yet another defeat. Around you, the others are waking with the same reluctance. The youngest children, whose faces once seemed animated by hope, now wear expressions as blank and gray as the sky itself. Yet, as so often happens, when optimism is at its lowest ebb, someone returns from the edge of camp with news that is neither triumph nor total defeat, but a strange and anticlimactic compromise. In the pale morning light, they have found a mammoth, your mammoth, lying still upon the ground, not far from the ruins of your elaborate trap. There are no dramatic wounds, no hero's spear embedded in its side. Instead, the animal appears to have simply lain down during the night and, perhaps exhausted by the day's commotion or betrayed by its own ancient heart, passed from life to legend in the most uneventful manner imaginable. There is a moment of collective confusion as the tribe stares at the enormous body. You would like to feel triumphant, but all you manage is a mild relief, quickly overtaken by the knowledge that this too will mean more work. The elders gather first, shuffling forward with an air of authority that feels especially unearned this morning. They circle the mammoth in a slow, solemn dance, poking at it with sticks and speculating about the cause of death with all the confidence of men who are never wrong, at least not in public. Debate ensues about what to do next, because even in victory, your people find opportunities for argument. Some insist on immediate butchery, while others fret about bad omens and the necessity of ritual. The children, meanwhile, are put to work gathering rocks, sticks, and any other item that might be marginally useful. You are assigned to help with the skinning, a task that is as tedious and cold as every other task you have ever been given. The hide is thick and unyielding, the fat sticky and difficult to remove, and your knife, despite constant sharpening, seems to grow duller with every stroke. While the labor continues, the elders continue to bicker. They argue over the correct method for dividing the meat, the order in which the organs should be removed, and the precise moment when it is appropriate to start complaining about the inevitable waste. Someone mentions the ancient tradition of offering a portion to the spirits, but this is quickly overridden by the more immediate tradition of hoarding as much as possible for one's own family. The day is a blur of labor. You hack, saw, drag, and haul, your arms growing numb and your mind wandering in slow, bored circles. The air fills with the coppery tang of blood, the stink of steaming viscera, and the constant drone of flies. Where did they come from in this endless cold? You listen to the low drone of complaints from your companions, each one convinced that their share is unfairly small, or that they have been given the worst part of the animal. Someone claims to have found a mammoth's tooth the size of a child's fist, and this, inevitably, sparks another argument over ownership. The division of spoils becomes a ritual of its own. The meat is weighed and measured, parceled out in strips and chunks, each allocation accompanied by a recitation of ancient grievances. Bones are stacked in a haphazard pile for future use as tools, weapons, or merely as evidence of survival in a world that values such trophies. The tusks, smooth and curved and ghostly white, are the subject of an especially bitter dispute, which the chief elder resolves by claiming them for ceremonial purposes, a decision that satisfies no one and pleases himself most of all. By midday, the once mighty mammoth has been reduced to a collection of parcels, bundles, and bloody footprints in the snow. The work is finished, but no one feels celebratory. Instead, the tribe gathers by the fire, such as it is, to eat in silence, each person turning over in their mind the memory of the hunt and the knowledge that, in the end, luck had more to do with success than skill or planning. The children chew strips of tough meat and listen to the elders' stories, which are already being revised to paint the day in a more heroic light. According to the new narrative, your tribe's cunning drove the mammoth to exhaustion. Your trap was nearly perfect, and everyone played a vital role in the victory. No one is fooled, but no one bothers to argue. As the sun begins to set, painting the plain with the same colorless light that began the day, you find yourself staring at the horizon. The cold is returning, as it always does. The snow has already covered most of the signs of your struggle. The elders sit in a tight knot, discussing plans for the next hunt, as if this one never happened. The younger hunters argue quietly, some blaming the elders, others blaming each other, a few blaming fate, or the gods, or the mammoth itself for its lack of cooperation. You realize, with a kind of numb clarity, that this is the true rhythm of your life. Long periods of waiting, brief flurries of chaos, and then a return to the dull and endless cycle of work, complaint, and survival. The promise that next time will be different hangs in the air, as empty as the sky overhead. You wonder if, in some distant future, someone will look at your people's bones and wonder at the stories they tell, whether they will imagine heroes and legends, or whether they will see only a tired, hungry tribe doing what it must to endure another day. The fire burns lower, the meat grows cold in your hands. The voices around you fade into the hush of wind across the snow. You lie down, pulling your furs tight, and close your eyes, already half asleep and already dreading the dawn. Somewhere, far away, a new herd of mammoths is moving through the mist, unaware of your hopes, your failures, or your endless, determined persistence. And so, your hunt ends, not with glory, not even with disaster, but with the slow, grinding passage of another day, another mammoth, another story retold and quietly forgotten as the world turns and the cold returns, patient and eternal.